Hello, everyone, and welcome back to 305 Insights. I'm your host, Alan Somerton, and today we're discussing the college football playoff rankings, the final ones of the season, the ones that set the stage for this brand new 12-team playoff. And it appears there was some controversy. We'll get into a few of them, it's not just one, but of course we have to address the elephant in the room, no pun intended. The Alabama Crimson Tide finish as the first team out, followed by Miami. As Clemson gets in, based off of being the ACC champions, and SMU falls to 11, staying ahead of Alabama. Now, the discussions around this heading into championship weekend was, do you punish a team for having an extra data point for making it to their respective championship game? And this was specifically pointed at SMU because they were ranked number 8. Leaving the committee room, if SMU lost, would they be pushed out? Now, the thing that helped SMU is, even though they were down 17 in the fourth quarter, they came all the way back. They honestly should have went to overtime, but the kicker didn't really kick it far enough. Clemson returned it, got it within striking distance of one more play to get them within field goal range. They ran that one more play. The kid hit a 56-yard field goal as time expired. So, now the committee's presented with the idea of an 11-2 SMU team versus a 9-3 Alabama team. Now, everybody knows my feelings about the whole concept of brand. Booger McFarland brought that up in the show, and for some reason, Kirk Herbstreit said that was low-hanging fruit, even though he labeled it as online discourse, trolls even. I don't know if he said that part, but it's not low-hanging fruit when you have the likes of Alabama getting in year after year, backing in when maybe they weren't the most deserving team. We're talking about the concept of playing games on the field and seeing the results versus these hypotheticals. And this is what we talked about previously, where the SEC is the king of hypotheticals. Lane Kiffin has been going on for the whole week about how the SEC is better. You know what would have helped your case, Lane, if you didn't lose to a 4-8 Kentucky team? That would have helped your case. Yeah, you beat Georgia. Awesome. Don't lose to Kentucky. When you have a clear talent and coaching advantage, and you somehow fumble that game away. You also lost to Florida. Don't lose to Florida. But again, Florida was surging, so just unfortunate for them. However, that Kentucky game sticks out like a sore thumb. The same thing applies to Alabama. Don't lose to a 6-6 Vanderbilt team that you don't lose to. In the history of your program, I don't know if they did, it was decades ago. Don't lose to that team. And don't lose to a 6-6 Oklahoma team. Well, you were one of their 6 wins. You were one of their 2 SEC wins. And not only do you lose to Oklahoma, you get dominated by Oklahoma. And this isn't a good Oklahoma team. There isn't a lot of metrics that say they're a good team. And you got boat race 24-3. Outside of the Northern Illinois loss by Notre Dame, that was probably the worst loss of any playoff contender. I say playoff contender. I'm not talking about like Missouri losing to A&M or anything like that. Because you had Boise State losing to Oregon. Penn State has lost to Ohio State in Oregon. SMU lost to a BYU team. that finished 10-2, and they also had Preston Stone starting at quarterback. Ever since they switched to Jennings, their only loss was to Clemson. Ohio State had the loss to Michigan, but that was only a 3-point loss. Tennessee, Clemson, Arizona State. Yeah, I mean, I think I can safely say, I'm sure I could be fact-checked on this eventually, that the Oklahoma was one of the worst losses for a contending championship team. And Nick Saban had this notion that he was trying to push of, quote, not all records are created equally. And my rebuttal to that is this supposed to be breaking news? We don't have to look, let's not look at college football. And when I say, like, is this breaking news, we got to look at it from a sports perspective. Look at the NFL in the AFC East. For 20 years, Tom Brady and company, Bill Belichick, etc., ran wild all over the Jets, Dolphins, and Bills. And for roughly 20 years, give or take, those teams were just incredibly mediocre. And they took advantage of that. Do you think other teams in the NFL were excited about that? I mean, when you're able to go up against a Jets team that hasn't made the playoffs in 14 years now, and a lot of those years were under Tom Brady. And again, this is a team that made under Rex Ryan those few years. And they had that little run, sure. But, you know, the Bills, until very recently, they were a middling franchise. The same thing with the Dolphins until they got Tua McDaniels, middling franchise. Again, not all records are created equally. AFC South. Currently, you have the Texans, Colts, Jaguars, Titans. Come on. Everybody's favorite, the NFC South. The Bucs are in first place at 7-6. The Falcons are 6-7. The Saints are 5-8. The Panthers are 3-10. One team is above 500 in that division. Meanwhile, you look at a team like the NFC North. Lions 12-1. Vikings 11-2. Packers 9-4. Then you got the Bears at 4-9. You think the Packers are wondering, man, why can't we be in an easier division? Come on. AFC North has always had the Steelers, Ravens, Bengals, Browns. Browns has always been, the laughing stock, of course, but the Steelers, Ravens, and more recently the Bengals have always been battling it out. That's a tough division. You think they're complaining all the time? They know the drill. You look at baseball. You got the AL East with the Yankees. You got the Red Sox. You got the Blue Jays. All teams in major markets that can compete with a high payroll. And you got the likes of Baltimore and Tampa going up against them. You think it's fun for them? Meanwhile, the Indians in Cleveland, the Guardians in Cleveland can sit there with, I don't want to say a small payroll, but relative to baseball, I guess it is, $100 and some odd $1 million payroll and just win the division with 88 wins a year. Meanwhile, if you have 87 wins in the AL East, you're in fourth place. You got the Dodgers, Giants, Padres battling out. Every once in a while, Arizona comes up to the plate. Meanwhile, the Cardinals get a beat on the Reds and the Pirates in their Central Division. Yes, not all records are created equally. But you sleep in the bed that you make. And the SEC chose to add Missouri years ago. They chose to add Texas A&M years ago. And they chose to add Texas and Oklahoma this year. So you're going to have the likes of Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Florida, Ole Miss, Texas, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Auburn, Missouri, battling out. That's the path you chose. It's the same thing in the Big Ten. You add a UCLA, USC, Washington, Oregon. And now it's not just those three teams of Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State battling it out just to see who's going to whoop up on Wisconsin or Iowa in the championship game. Yes, not all records are created equally. Then blame it on your commissioners. And this notion that, going forward, Alabama isn't going to have a tough out-of-conference schedule. You know what their out-of-conference schedule was this year? Wisconsin, who didn't make a bowl game. Mercer, Western Kentucky. And I forgot the fourth one, but I'm pretty sure it was one of those squash matches. You didn't lose to anybody out of conference. You lost to Vanderbilt. You lost to Oklahoma. Those are your two bad losses. And of course, you lost to Tennessee. Don't blame it on out of conference. Blame it on your conference schedule if you want, sure, and talk about strength of schedule. But that's the path that Greg Sankey chose as the SEC commissioner. You want to be the best conference? You want to have all the teams? You're going to suffer for it. Because you're not going to get all 12 playoff slots. Again, we've talked about this multiple times on this podcast. This was an SEC and Big Ten invitational. The fact that the ACC got two teams in is crazy. And now you know that the SEC and the Big Ten are going to push for a revamp of this system because of how it's played out. A, the SEC didn't get as many teams as it wanted it in. And B, we move on to the second controversy, where Oregon is being punished for going undefeated. You're supposed to reward teams for having a successful season. Do you know what Oregon's reward is for being the number one team in the country? Facing off against Ohio State or Tennessee. How's that fair to Oregon? And again, Dan Lanning and his coaching staff are going to get his kids prepared. And he's going to say all the right things in the media. But you look at the fifth seed, and everybody's been saying it for quite some time, that they're going to have an easier path. Now, of course, they're going to run into Oregon or whoever wins that bracket. But the winner of Clemson and Texas gets to face Arizona State. Boise State in the 3 seed gets to face the winner of SMU Penn State, and Georgia gets to face the winner of Notre Dame or Indiana. Folks, it's clear after the first iteration that they're going to revamp this in the sense of they still have to keep automatic bids for now for Power Conference winners, Power 4 Conference winners. And you're going to throw the Group of 5 a bone by giving them one shot. But you got to do reseeding for this. There has to be a sense of the best teams should be rewarded for how they proceed through the season. And again, you might go back and say, well, Alabama's one of the best teams. Again, they're 9-3. And you can complain that Texas got a lucky draw of the SEC schedule. Because you know what, folks? People want to point out that SMU didn't beat a top 25 team. And Nick Saban pointed that out about teams who were ranked that didn't beat teams in the top 25. You know where he conveniently stopped? Was at Texas. Texas hasn't beaten a top 25 team. But hey, anything that fits your narrative, go for it. That's the sad part about watching ESPN right now. It's clearly because they spend so much money in the SEC that they need to push that product to make it more valuable. But yeah, I wouldn't have Arizona State or Boise State in the top 4. That's just my personal opinion, but I mean, you'll see how it shakes out after this whole thing's done. The powers that be are going to make sure that they get what they want. But that being said, folks, everybody thought that the 12-team playoff would solve everything in the sense of, there wouldn't be a shafting like there was last year with FSU or a few years ago with the Baylor TCU incident. But again, there's always going to be teams that feel like they deserve to be in. Even though, at the end of the day, they controlled their own destiny. All these teams do. Miami shouldn't have blown a 21-point lead to Syracuse. Ole Miss shouldn't have lost to a 4-8 Kentucky team. South Carolina shouldn't have waited to go on a 6-game winning streak after being 3-3. Alabama shouldn't have lost to Oklahoma or Vanderbilt. There's a lot of things can be said about the season, folks. It's not how you start or how you finish, but it's the consistency that matters. So, did I think the committee got it right? It was a situation where you were picking whether you devalued championship games moving forward or you devalue the concept of strength of schedule. And I think the committee got it right. I think the committee got it right because championship games should matter. You should be proud of being the Big Ten, the ACC, the SEC, whichever group of 5, the Big 12. You should be proud of being a champion of your conference. And strength of schedule, honestly, we've talked about it for a while now. These rankings are built into preseason expectations, and they don't always match. Look at FSU, look at Michigan, look at Indiana, look at Boise State or Army, look at Arizona State, look at Colorado. There's a lot of teams that overachieved. There's a lot of teams that underachieved. I mean, say what you want about Missouri being 9-3 every time they ran into an actual opponent that had a pulse. Texas A&M blew them out. Alabama blew them out. I don't even know what the other loss is because I just think Missouri is one of the most overrated teams in the country. It doesn't matter of accumulation of talent. You also have to factor in coaching. And you have to factor in how they play on the field. That's it. We're taking away from the concept of the results on the field. And that's the scary part about how these college football playoff rankings have been evolving over the past decade. It almost seems like you're benefiting more from losses than you are from wins, which is the antithesis of sports to begin with. It's about playing the game and winning the game. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a podcaster here. I haven't played the game of college football, professional football. I've only watched it for decades. So, in the minds of the ESPN people on the desk, I know nothing, but hey, these are my opinions, and I think they're incredibly valid in this matter. That being said, folks, thanks for listening to this episode. You can find us on YouTube. Subscribe, like, follow, turn notifications on. Same thing on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Thanks for listening to this episode, folks. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll catch you next time here on 305 Insights.